Hello everyone. Today I thought I would look into a rather interesting underrated film, or a film that I think is kind of overlooked. This film is actually a foreign film. It has all Asian actors in it, and for the most part they are speaking Chinese, I believe, since it is taking place in China, and revolves around sort of Chinese history. So there are some interesting concepts, I think, in this film. And this film, as you can see by the title, is called House of Flying Daggers. Now, I think people get this title mixed up with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon because they sound so similar. Like, if you try to say the names 10 times as fast, or like the titles of the films, and you'll just go, which one's which again? And so I think this one kind of gets overlooked, and usually people, when they think of Chinese filmmaking, they'll often turn to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and not really this film. And that's why I kind of put it in that underrated category, because I think usually I feel like people associate with the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon film rather than this one. And the interesting thing too is that it's fairly similar to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in style form. You will see that there's a lot of martial arts involved in this film, and it's actually done really well. But it's very stylized, again, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You know, there's some scenes where it is kind of, you kind of have to let go of realism pretty much. You know, kind of just let go of that belief and just kind of, you know, realize that it's supposed to be more of an artsy film. It's not really supposed to be a a film that's very realistic in its approach to Chinese history. It's a lot more based upon art. You'll kind of see how the director does this. The costumes and the way the whole film sets itself up, I think, looks really cool. I really like how it looks. It really has this nice feel to it, and you do feel like you're getting a sense of the culture too. And it's so colorful too. I really like these like color schemes and these kinds of interesting things that they have within the film that sort of reflect onto Chinese culture, and again, sort of the artistic side of the Chinese culture, I guess you could say. It's very unique in that sense, and I find myself enjoying really the artsiness of it, even though at times it can come off maybe to some people as a little goofy and how it's constructed, because again, if you've watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, you will notice the similarities. People, you know, jumping into the air at points. I wouldn't say it's completely overly stylized like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There's a less, how do you say, it looks a lot more grounded in when people fight, but at the same time it's very stylized in how it approaches, I guess, sort of the maybe weaponry, and you'll see how there's multiple weapons in this movie, from bamboo to daggers to spears and such, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about if you choose to watch the film. But what you really need to go in as far as kind of style wise for this movie is that it's very artsy. It almost has this similar feel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but I feel like certain elements, I guess they captured me more. I felt like it was a lot more interesting, the fighting, especially with its locations, and I just like how it looks really like a work of art, except it's moving and there's characters and such. So that's kind of what you need to know going in as far as style is concerned. Another thing about this movie is that the plot opens up, but it's not it kind of takes itself in a different direction than what people expect. Basically, the House of Flying Daggers is supposed to be sort of a rebel organization that is against the Chinese government during the time. I believe it was the Tang Dynasty, from my research that I could pull, because sometimes it was hard to follow exactly the context of the Chinese history. But you will be given an intro sort of to this before the film begins, and it'll explain to you basically what the House of Flying Daggers is. But all you really need to know is that they're a rebel organization who's fighting against the Chinese government during the time, but very, I want to say very secretively. These aren't warriors in the same sense as maybe a military force. They're like spies. They also mention at one point in the beginning how they take from the rich and give to the poor, even though I don't think that's really shown in the film, actually. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing a scene where somebody is like, here, have, I don't remember that at all. But, yeah, it kind of revolves around the title in that sense. It's trying to paint that picture, because we have characters who are a part of the House of Flying Daggers. And one of these characters, who's a main character, is named Mei. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but she's played by Zhang Ziyi, and we've seen this actress before in Memoirs of a Geisha, but here she is the main protagonist to the movie, and she lends herself really well. I like how she's fairly passionate and feisty at times, especially when she fights, but she's also very graceful and kind-hearted, and you'll kind of see how her character sort of develops throughout the story, and how her relationships sort of affect the circumstances that she's in. In particular with the character named Jin, who is played by Takeshi Kanashiro, and I am so sorry if I pronounced that name incorrectly, but I really don't want to give too much away about this plot, because if I do, it's definitely going to go into spoiler territory, and I don't want to do that for anybody who has not seen this film. But all you need to know is that these two characters come in contact. She's from the she's part of the rebel group, the House of Flying Daggers, and you'll see this, and you'll see how these other characters come in and how they sort of play a role in unveiling things within the plot. There's a lot of double crossing in this movie too, but the reason why it handles it a lot better than the Pirates movies, in my opinion, is because they don't make too many characters double cross each other. There's only really two characters that are kind of on that double crossing level, and that they're on one side and then they're on the other, and yada yada. And this is basically between the House of Flying Daggers and the Chinese kind of government during the time. So you got these two sides, and you'll see which characters ultimately are the ones sort of deceiving the other, and you'll kind of see how there's this whole kind of elaborate sort of plot set up. Now, the thing is too is that even though there's an elaborate plot set up, I think it might be bothersome to some people because they feel it should focus on the title, the House of Flying Daggers. But really, the House of Flying Daggers is kind of a love story. I don't want to give away who falls in love with who. You'll kind of see there's a love angle. I'm going to say a love angle because, again, we have one character who does not want to be with the other one, and that's clearly established. And then the other one gets jealous. We kind of see the same kind of formula with the Duke in Moulin Rouge. But with this one, it's played out to be, I guess, a little bit more subtle with its emotions. There's a lot of build-up between the characters, I feel. Maybe not as much on one particular character who is part of the love sort of angle, who's the one that's kind of left out in the background, because we don't really see his character interact with the one that he likes a whole lot. So we really don't see that, and I guess it creates this kind of one-dimensionality for the audience. And I think some people were thinking going into this film, oh, it's going to be more of a political type commentary on Chinese history. And what ends up happening is that ultimately it becomes sort of a more of a love story. And I find it interesting too how, even though it is a love story, it kind of plays out interesting in how you'll see the two people who are on the opposite ends sort of come together and sort of realize that that being on these sides, it's really all the same thing. It's just people, killing each other for whatever political reasons, and that's not a free life to be tied down to one particular group, obviously. So there is this kind of whole emphasis on being free from this kind of burden. And you'll kind of see how the love story sort of plays, I think, into that. So again, it might bother some people that it goes into this kind of more cliche love story. But I think for a foreign film, it works really well. I mean, I felt something for the characters. I felt like that there was these aspects to them that made them likable, and also these sort of flaws as well. I think that overall it's touching. The ending is touching. I don't want to give away what really happens, because again, if I keep talking about the plot, I'm just gonna keep spewing out spoilers, because if I ever go into the context really of this plot, it'll just be spoilers for everybody. So all you really need to know is that it has this political aspect to it, but really when you get down to it, it's based upon a love story about these two people, Jin and Mei, who are on opposing teams, who kind of come together, and you'll see what ultimately ends up happening to them. It's sort of like Romeo and Juliet, but not really. Don't think of it in the same way as that, because it's completely different than Romeo and Juliet, even though there is this opposing, opposite factor going on there. Plays itself out completely different. But ultimately, I think that's really all anybody really needs to know going into this film. Again, I understand if some people might feel that the love story is a little cliche-ic, but I think what they do with it is appropriate, and I think it says something, especially with this whole concept of freeing yourself from this kind of these sides, these opposing ends of a sort of dispute. And you will see this in the film, and sort of how things are ultimately revealed. But for the most part, I like how elaborate sort of it is, but at the same time being simplistic and easy for the audience to follow. It doesn't feel fairly cluttered like the Pirates sequels. It seems to have a decent enough story to carry itself through, and I think it comes across effectively for the most part. I mean, I understand if some people might feel romance is cliche-ic, but I feel like the way they handled it was actually rather surprisingly well for a martial arts film, a Chinese martial arts film. So for the most part, I think that's really ultimately all I can say without giving away any spoilers. But again, there is sort of the political context there. It's just emphasized later on that it is trying to be more of a love story. And if that's not your cup of tea, then I'd suggest not checking this out. But if you're open-minded and curious about what ends up happening to these characters and if you're interested in sort of this kind of Chinese cultural style, definitely recommendable. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about it. It has its good moments, and I think it's definitely at least worth a watch. And I'll be sure to put a link of it down below, because I apparently managed to find it on YouTube, surprisingly. That's where I ended up actually being able to watch it. So if you want to check it out, feel free to click the link below. I hope it stays up. It might get taken down by YouTube, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns? More than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.